Hello and welcome to this video on the Dark Forest Hypothesis. While this is not a sly reference to Slender Man conspiracies, it is an explanation as to why we may not ever encounter aliens. If you would think of the Dark Forest Hypothesis as the antithesis of the Fermi paradox, that is, where the Fermi paradox says that with all the planets the universe has, and that at least some of these are habitable, surely we should encounter aliens at some point. But we haven't. The answer to this, at least by contrast, is the Dark Forest Hypothesis. The simple explanation is that the universe is a massive forest, shrouded in darkness and full of unknown threats. You don't know if the sounds you make will invite a certain death and destruction, or a friendly being. The risk from a mistake is far greater than the possible rewards, or at least a lack of harm. Therefore, contact is to be avoided at all costs. Of course, this is based on both a book and a later TV series, but the actual theory itself is the core of both. In the context of aliens, we have the universe and the idea of not just spacefaring civilizations, but also things like radio waves. If an alien civilization is able to travel through space, at least to the extent where they can reach other inhabited planets, obviously, other civilizations should be able to do the same. It also stands to reason not all, if not most of these civilizations will not be receptive to competition. This is because there is a finite number of habitable worlds, and occupation or colonization of each is a competition. Arguably, once one civilization occupies a planet, another doing so is much more difficult, if not impossible, until the occupants are rehoused, let's say. In fact, we can compare this scenario to the Warhammer, Starship Trooper, and other universes, wherein civilizations compete over the worlds that can be lived on, in, and around. Perhaps the Warhammer universe is the best example, where the Blueberries encountered the human empire while trying to expand, only to experience the warm embrace of the Solar Eater's heavy flamer. The other part of this is something like radio waves. These are a signal to the universe, practically screaming, we are out there. Admittedly, it is a vague signal without multiple points of signal reception allowing for triangulation. Even then, it is a clear signal that humanity exists, and we see that with Futurama, and for that matter, we see the exact same outcome.
Could you repeat that last part?
This is an outrage! I demand to know what happened to the plucky lawyer and her compellingly short garment.
Due to technical difficulties, we now bring you 8 animated shows in a row.
That is, the aliens receive the signal, know where humanity is, and become very unhappy with us, albeit for very, very silly reasons. This brings us back to the alien contact in the Dark Forest. If in the Dark Forest we are hunters walking the forest blindly, and other civilizations made of aliens are other hunters and each walking the forest too, each of us is just as blind as we are to the other. Neither we nor any other hunter knows if the other civilization or hunter will see us as another being or food. Therefore, the best course of action for any civilization is to shoot first and hope you made the right call. This removes any threat before it can blossom into a full-on threat. However, the same issue also means it's best not to make any contact at all. If you do not come into contact with other civilizations or hunters, they cannot be a threat. The caveat to this whole theoretical answer to the Fermi paradox is a rather big caveat. It's the time taken to travel. Unlike games such as Stellaris, wherein travel time is less of a concern, even on the biggest maps, in reality, a fleet sent out to purge the mutant heretic and Xenos today may not arrive for hundreds of years. It will be technologically stagnant, while the target site or civilization will continue to grow technologically. That means a civilization without a massive technological advantage will be at a gross disadvantage when it arrives. This means they will start a war with very little hope of victory, It would be like the Anglo-Zanzibar War, a war that lasted about 38 minutes, plus or minus a couple of minutes based on whose record you're looking at. This was a war wherein the British leadership declared war on the Sultanate after a leadership debacle. The ultimatum was sent, the ultimatum was ignored, and the British had 2 cruisers with 152mm to 230mm cannons, and nearly 24 of these, if not more, along with 3 gunboats armed with another series of rather large cannons. All of these boats fired on the city and palace, followed by the assault with 150 marines and 900 local levies. It ended with a practically total capitulation, despite Zanzibar having a 3-to-1 advantage in soldiers, but a gross disadvantage with artillery. They only had 2 12-pounder cannons of note. That meant with nothing more than 1 British sailor injured, there were 500 dead or wounded and 1 yacht sunk on the Zanzibar side. Zanzibar lost all its artillery, machine guns and palace. This result is pretty much a perfect match for what would happen with the Dark Forest hypothesis, under the circumstances wherein there is no technological advantage. Without that technological advantage, or perhaps it would be better to call it a disadvantage, and depending on which side of this you're looking at, it would be a complete wipe of humanity or a very sudden and very rude introduction to another civilization, wherein we suddenly and unexpectedly destroyed their fleet. And therein lies the key, and much like the Anglo-Zanzibar War, wherein the technological advantage allowed for the British to completely walk over the entirety of the attempted, let's say, resistance, the alien civilizations would either be the British or the Zanzibarians, and either be completely destroyed or completely destroy us in turn. And this last point is why we don't meet other aliens, or at least, in theory, why we don't see any other alien civilizations. We simply don't have the opportunity to meet them because they want to avoid, well, for the most part, unwanted outcomes where they meet a superior and certainly unfriendly civilization. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please do post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.